Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. If you're wondering why I'm in such a good mood this evening, it's because football season is officially here. I am so excited. The preseason and being able to just watch games again got me very excited for the season. I know us Boston fans need something to be excited about at this time of year because our baseball team is not really providing much of that excitement for us. So maybe when we turn to the fall and football season, we will have a little bit more excitement in our lives. But I am here with a special guest who knows it better than anybody else, Nick Cattles. You know him as the Boston sports radio guy. He has really made his mark in the Boston sports scene. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I want to apologize for people who are watching this. I got a little kind of blue hue to the side of my face, and it's because I'm trying to get my space settled. So I'm not turning into some weird gray alien during this interview. It's just the light from the windows doing something funky. So if you can deal with that, I'm happy to be here with you.
Well, it definitely does not bother me, so I think already you're already on the right track here with this.
Good. Great to know.
But I'm so excited to have you. I know you're a huge Patriots guy, and I am looking forward to just hearing your thoughts on this team because last season was very frustrating to say the least. I don't really, know how I can describe the misery that came with watching that offense on a regular weekly basis with somebody calling the offensive plays that just should simply not have been calling the offensive plays. We watched the Patriots during the preseason. They are ready to go for week one against the Eagles this Sunday at 4:25. I am very, very excited for the TB12 reunion and retirement ceremony that the Patriots have planned. But they're in a tough division this year. And what I wanted to start with from you is obviously they got rid of Matt Patricia as the offensive play caller, which is great news for everybody. And they brought in Bill O'Brien, who actually is an offensive minded guy. How much of a difference do you think that's going to make for the Patriots offense compared to how they looked last year?
I think it's going to be night and day. I really do. Matt Patricia, look, he got criticized and he should have got criticized. The offense last year was brutal, and there's really no excuse for how that operation was run last year. But I thought Matt Patricia was put in a position that was impossible to win. I mean, as you mentioned, he's not an offensive guy. He's a defensive guy, pure, and that's who he is. And Bill put him in a spot where I thought it was a very, very difficult spot. If people remember, not only was Patricia the offensive coordinator, but he was also the offensive line coach. That lasted about a week, and then Belichick realized this is a terrible idea. So let's put Yates as the offensive line coach and let him work with the guys during the game, and let's have Patricia try to work offensively with the team and call the plays. So I think it's going to be night and day, though. I'm very excited about Bill O'Brien and what he's going to bring. I think he's going to be able to coach around certain aspects of this team that need to be addressed. I think all of us see the offensive line as an issue. I do think if the offensive line gets healthy, it's better than people are giving it credit for. I think we're kind of wrapped up in watching backups play and rookies play, and it's been a disaster. There's no doubt about that in the preseason. But if you're telling me that, on Sunday, we're looking at Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Michael Wenu, and Calvin Anderson with some help at right tackle until he gets up to speed because obviously he's been sick. Right. I think the offensive line will be better than people think. But overall, just, again, I use the word operation. Mac Jones, I think his confidence is high, and it's because of Bill O'Brien. O'Brien knows what to call, when to call it, why to call it. He also knows how to prepare his offense for any situation. He knows how to game plan week to week. He knows, Belichick like the back of his hand because he has the experience here. So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that as far as things are run, I'm not telling you that this offense is going to score 30 points a week, But as far as how this offense is run and how clean it's run, and the ideas behind what they're trying to accomplish with things like RPOs and getting the ball out of Mac's hands quickly, especially against this Eagles defensive line in week 1, you'll see an actual NFL offense look like an NFL offense, which would be very nice compared to what we saw last year.
Yeah, I don't even know a word to describe what we saw last year with that offense, but it was just a mess every single week. And it was super disappointing because, as we know, year after year, the defense is good. I mean, Bill is a defensive guy. We know that he's going to produce a strong defense every year. And if the Patriots had an offense that could match that defense, they would have been a very competitive team last year. And so it's going to be crucial this year that the offense just looks a lot more clean and just overall concise, because it seemed like last year there was just a lot of just miscombobulation and just a lot of things that were just very much not in sync when it came to that offense.
Yeah, the spacing was off. How many times did you see wide receivers in the same area?
Oh my gosh.
The answer to that is too many times. And that should never happen. Like, you should not have two guys right next to each other during, any kind of route tree. So, yeah, I mean, the spacing was off. The timing was off. I don't think anybody that played within that offensive, I don't even want to call it structure, that circus last year, I don't think anybody had confidence. And, Kendrick Bourne was the guy who came out and said it out loud. You see, he said the quiet part out loud, and he got put in the doghouse for it all last year. But I think everybody, I mean, and I know that a lot of people get on the media. And look, some of the media, I agree with you. Okay, I agree with you that sometimes us in the media can get a little wild. We can over exaggerate. We can suffer from hyperbole. But everybody that was watching that offense during camp last year, they were warning us. That they were telling us, like, look, this is not going to be good, and it doesn't look right, and it doesn't look like the guys know what they're doing, and it doesn't look like they're on the same page. And they didn't see any improvement during camp, and that was worrisome. And so I would say that if you look at that objectively last year and say the people that follow this team every single day or at practice, talk to people behind closed doors, I think as negative and as pessimistic as they were last year, I think they're pretty optimistic this year that at least things are going to be run the right way. Again, it doesn't mean they're going to be a top 5 offense, top 10 offense, but will it look like an NFL offense? I think it will. Spacing issues, stuff like that. Those things should be sorted out. More play action you'll see this year. I'm sure of it. You'll see, guys like Hunter Henry get involved more, I think, and you'll see Kendrick Bourne involved a little bit more. And it'll just make a little bit more sense when you watch a game offensively.
Yeah, I think everybody was sitting there last year trying to just figure out what was even going on and the thought process behind some of those plays that were being run. Because I know that's how I felt week to week. And I was like, what am I even watching right now? Like, this is just not an NFL caliber offense. Like, what am I actually seeing? It was kind of entertaining sometimes, as frustrating as it was, just to see how much of a joke that looked like last year.
It was brutal. And, I know, look, I criticized Mac at the end of last year, and just anybody listening to this, I'm a card-carrying member of the Mac Jones, fan club, if you want to call me a part of the fan club. I think he's an NFL quarterback. I think he's, he could be a top 15 quarterback, most likely between 12 and 15 instead of being, 7 to 10 ranked in the league. But I think he's at least, slightly above average. And I got on him last year a little bit because, emotionally he kind of lost it, right? I mean, he lost it towards the end. But if you want to try to be fair, and I still don't think there's excuses to, show how upset you are, frustrated, especially during a game, that's not going to help anything. But the dude did have to sit around and deal with that for months. And I don't know if anybody out there has had an issue at their job that bothers them for months and months and months and months. eventually, I have to. Eventually, you're going to kind of flip the lid a little bit. And so I don't like the quarterback doing what he did at the end of the year last year in some of those games. However, do I sit there and say that there was absolutely no reason or logic behind his frustration? Of course there was. If you and I are frustrated with what's going on, imagine being the quarterback of that team, and his career depends on that. So I think, when you look at Mac, I would say it's very similar to me as Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Tua coming out of Alabama, I was a fan of Tua. And I think Tua is at least an average quarterback at the NFL level. But people were killing Tua up until last year. And then all of a sudden, people were singing Tua's praises. Well, what changed? Mike McDaniel came over from San Francisco. They added talent. They brought somebody in by the name of Tyreek Hill, who happens to be one of the best receivers in the game. Yeah. And when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel's offensive system, and when you have those kinds of weapons at your disposal and you have the ability to scheme things up, it changes a lot for the quarterback. So I just look at Mac and I say, look, if you think Tua, before all the concussion stuff happened to him last year, if you think Tua was an above-average NFL quarterback, I don't see why Mac can't be an above-average quarterback. I think Mac's better than Tua. I just think Mac's dealing with a lot less weaponry than Tua. I think Mac is as accurate as Tua. I think Mac probably has a slightly stronger arm than Tua. Mac has less of an injury history than Tua. I would say Mac has better athleticism than Tua. So I think, and I'm not telling you that Mac Jones is a great athlete, but I think if you're comparing those two guys, I'd give the slight edge to Mac. He does better as a ball carrier and kind of manipulating the pocket and all of that stuff. So, you hope that Mac has the time in the pocket, that the offensive line takes care of him, and that this wide receiver core and tight end core can stay healthy. Because to me, it's not just about the level of play and how good these guys are. I think they have a number of good receivers. They don't have a great receiver, but they've got a number of good ones. It's really if those guys can stay on the field. How's Juju Smith-Schuster's knee? How Devontae Parker missed 2 practices last week. Mike Reese said, he didn't look that great at practice yesterday when he showed back up. So is Devontae Parker, who had a fantastic preseason. Is he going to be healthy? He's had a long history of soft tissue injuries. Tyquan Thornton is hurt again. He's on IR. So can they just stay healthy? If they can stay healthy and the offensive line is solid, I think their offense will be okay, not spectacular.
Yeah, it's interesting when you bring up Mac and the lack of weapons, because that's something I've been saying for a while. If I'm Mac Jones, I'm looking at this whole situation and feeling like I haven't been put in the best position to be able to maximize my potential as best as I can in the time that I've been here so far. And like you said, you look at the Dolphins, and I look at it more as the people surrounding Tua than his ability directly that makes that team really what it is. And I've been waiting for Bill to surround Mac with those types of players, and he just hasn't really done that. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter have so many different feelings about Mac Jones. There are people who are saying, I don't trust Mac. He's not the guy that, can win us some Super Bowls, or he's not the guy who can really lead this team to be a successful franchise. And then other people who are saying things like he just was not in a good situation at all last season. So he, deserves another chance to really show that he is the guy. I think he has a very high football IQ. I think he seems to have a very strong awareness of what goes on the field. And last year, he didn't have the best protection out there either, because the offensive line last year was not fantastic. So he didn't have a lot of time to throw the ball last year. And I know when Bailey Zappi came in, it was, we want Zappi and like he should play more, but he was running so many basic plays when he was out there, and the types of games that he was playing. I mean, no offense, but it was during such a soft part of the schedule when he was playing too. And it was the situations that they were putting him in and the types of plays they were running with him out there were just not very complex. So I feel like you could replace Zappy with any second string quarterback and be able to run those types of plays they were running with him out there. So people were saying, the offense looks more in sync with Zappy out there. Like, why is he not playing more? But in reality, I felt like it was more because they were running a lot less complex of plays when Zappy was on the field. And I think it was pretty unfair for people to just give up on Mac so quickly after they saw such a small sample size of Zappy in the games that he played in. And then just immediately we're ready to just like can Mac Jones when people don't give Mac enough credit for what he did in his rookie season. I mean, people tend to forget that his rookie season, they were a competitive football team.
Yeah, look, we're not only in the same church, we're sitting in the same pew when you talk about Bailey Zappi. I never had the Zappi fever. I never caught it. I agree with everything you said as far as what they did scheme-wise with Bailey Zappi versus what they did with Mac. The level of competition, I think you're absolutely right about that. And, people, they just read too much into simple things at times. And they just kind of equate results with, that's the guy's better. I don't think there was anything that glorified that or highlighted that any better than the Chicago game, which I thought was an embarrassment for the fans that were at Gillette, chanting for Bailey Zappi. That was just a joke. By the way, Bill Belichick handled that thing like a hand grenade. So he didn't do Mac any favors in that Monday night game. That was just totally mismanaged from before the game to the end of the game. But Chicago, that game was pretty much the perfect example of the Bailey Zappi experience to me. Everybody talks about it, My guy Felger will talk about it, he was great early in that game. He was great in the first half, and then he was, he wasn't as good in the second half. Well, the second half, he was a puddle, number one. But number two, go back to that first half. One touchdown was, if I remember correctly, I think it was a touchdown. One touchdown was a wide open receiver. I don't know if it was Myers but somebody was wide open in the middle of the field. It was a blown coverage by Chicago's defense, and all Zappi had to do was hit the wide open receiver. Yeah. And the other gigantic play that was made was an unbelievable, spectacular 50-50 ball that was caught that had absolutely no right being caught. Those two plays accounted for pretty much all of the production in the first half for Bailey Zappi. Is that the quarterback? No. The quarterback is not responsible for the defense blowing coverage.
Yeah, that's not their fault.
No. Is it the quarterback's, did he make the spectacular catch? No. So in the second half, he goes out there, and again, he was awful. So people put too much into that. And I remember, look, I don't want to date myself here, but I remember the pre-Brady days. Yeah. And, there's this favorite saying, and Brady was, I guess you'd say the fly in the ointment to, the most popular guy in the room is the backup quarterback, and everybody wants the backup quarterback because they think he could be better than the starter. Brady obviously did end up being better than the starter. Yeah. But for the most part, backup quarterbacks are backup quarterbacks for reasons. And I remember, the Michael Bishop time when people were losing their minds. Oh, the Patriots should start Michael Bishop. And there was a little bit of Jacoby Brissett fever for a little bit here and there. So it happens. It happens. But I think it's clear that Mac is better than Bailey Zappi. And I also agree with your point as far as backup quarterback. A lot of people have, just gone crazy over the last week or two about, Bailey was cut. Who's going to be the backup quarterback? And here's the, I'll be honest with all you people listening and watching. Here's the truth of it. The truth of it is, it don't matter who your backup quarterback is if you're the Patriots. You're not talented enough to go to the playoffs with Bailey Zappi. You're not talented enough to go to the playoffs with Brian Hoyer. If you picked up Colt McCoy, it's very unlikely you're talented enough to get to the playoffs with Colt McCoy as your quarterback. Matt Corral, we'll see. I don't think this year, but, give him a full year in the system and all of that.
Right.
Maybe that guy can end up, challenging to be a starting quarterback in the league. I watched him in college. I think he's got some natural talent. He's got athleticism. He's got a good arm. So maybe he does develop into something. But as far as, the Bailey Zappies and the Brian Hoyers and the Colt McCoys and, just name backup quarterback XYZ in the league, they're not winning 11 games, 12 games. It ain't happening. You're not everybody is the San Francisco 49ers. And trust me, I worked out in Sacramento for a year and a half before I moved back home. And, I watched every Niners game when I was out there. So I have a pretty good idea as to how that team is. And that team has a top 3 defense in the NFL, loaded with talent at all 3 levels. And, their offensive line last year was pretty damn good. They got the best left tackle in the game in Trent Williams. They've got Deebo Samuel, Brendan Ayuk, George Kittle. They traded for Christian McCaffrey. So when you have a top 3 defense in the league, literally shutting 90% of their opposition down, and then you also have a bunch of skill position players surrounding the backup quarterback with one of the best offensive linemen in the game protecting that quarterback's blind side, with Kyle Shanahan, who's a pretty damn good play caller, not the best game manager, by the way, but a good play caller. That's the perfect storm. Most cases, your starting quarterback goes down, you're screwed. There ain't going to be many Nick Foles with the Eagles, unfortunately. I know it's a bad memory for all of us, but those are few and far between. 98, 99% of the backup quarterbacks are just there to not get in the way. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And to go to your other point, by the way, as far as, Mac and did Belichick help him enough? No. And that's been the case from day one. Go down the list of all these quarterbacks in the league. All the best quarterbacks that you can name, they have a stud number 1 receiver pretty much. Look at what the Bengals did for Joe Burrow. Look at what the Bills did by going out there and getting Diggs. We talked about Miami. Look at Justin Herbert for the Chargers and his receiving core. Look at every single young quarterback in the league. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts wasn't Jalen Hurts until what happened? Philly went out and got A.J. Brown. They got A.J. Brown. They get Devontae Smith. We'll see those guys this weekend. They also have a good tight end in Dallas Goedert. Go around and look at these young quarterbacks and then compare that. Compare the level of talent surrounding those young quarterbacks and compare it to what Mac Jones has had. It is undeniable that the Patriots have not given him as much talent as other young quarterbacks have received, which is frustrating, by the way, because he's on his rookie deal. And if you're going to spend money and you're going to put talent around the quarterback, it would have happened in the last 3 years, because now after this year, Mac is going to make more money. And so do you think Bill Belichick, if he decides to pay Mac Jones $30 million a year, $35 million, do you think he's going to spend money on wide receiver? I don't think there's any chance in hell he does that.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was all of that talk going around, about D-Hop and the whole Patriots situation and them being close to working out a deal with him. Were you buying into that, or how much of that do you think was legitimate before he did end up going to the Titans? Because I know Patriots Twitter was an absolute wreck when the news broke that he is committing to the Titans and that's where he's going, because obviously that is the type of receiver that the Patriots could really need in their receiving core right now, because once again, like you said, they don't have a true wide receiver 1, and they have not for a long time now. Do you think that they were really that serious about giving him a chance in New England?
I think they were serious as long as it happened on their terms. Yeah, I think they were super interested if it was the right price. Like, are you super interested in a Porsche? I don't know. But if the Porsche costs $15,000, you'd be super interested in the Porsche. So DeAndre Hopkins, I think the interest was there, but they were trying to get him on like a Winnebago price when the dude wanted a Bentley payday like that. And so Like when you look at the contract situation, I'm even more irritated about it now because when the real numbers came out, what a joke. I mean, the Patriots could have had DeAndre Hopkins' deal with Tennessee in all essence is a 1-year deal. And it's a 1-year deal, not on big money. And, I do the podcast with Greg Bedard every week. And when that news broke, I lost my mind on the podcast because I was getting pushback from some Patriots fans that were telling me like, oh, well, he's washed. Really? Like he could end up being washed. He really could, but there's no indication that he's washed. When you go back to last year, compare his statistics. If you want to kind of make your brain melt, go look at Jacoby Myers' stats last year and compare them to Hopkins. And then realize that Hopkins played, I think it was 5 less games or 6 less games than Myers did. And people were in love with Jacoby Myers. Didn't want the Patriots to let him walk. And why would you bring in Juju instead of, just keeping Jacoby Myers? Patriots fans loved Myers. Look at Myers' production compared to Hopkins' production last year. And Hopkins was on the worst team in the NFL for all intents and purposes. And he missed 6 games due to a suspension, which, by the way, again, not injury related. So I thought it was a can't miss kind of thing. I don't know why I do know why. Again, Belichick didn't want to pay the price. And people were arguing and pushing back about, oh, he doesn't practice. Well, first of all, Belichick's always handled veterans differently. Christian Fourier will tell you that. He's handled certain guys differently. Number 2, look at how Belichick handled the team in this preseason, in this camp. How many guys did he take care of? How many guys got, veteran days? It wouldn't have been a big deal. Trust me when I tell you. And nobody would have cared if D-Hop went out there on Sunday and balled out. I wouldn't have heard one person bitch about DeAndre Hopkins and his lack of practice in July if he was catching 85 footballs this year. Nobody would care. Nobody. So that pushback was crap. And, do I think he's a top 5 receiver? No, I don't. But he's making money like he's the 25th receiver in the league. And when you see Odell Beckham Jr. make $15 million guaranteed with Baltimore, and you're going to pay Hopkins less money, then don't come to me about how he missed some games. Because again, if you look back, if you just do the work, trust the work, go back and look at D-Hop. I think he missed 2 games in his first 7 or 8 years in the league. Dude played every week. He had some soft tissue injuries, and then he tore his MCL a couple of years ago, which cost him some games. Breaking news, when you play a game where other people are running into you with helmets, you're probably going to get hurt from time to time. So, yeah, he got hurt. And 1 year he missed some games. But the games he missed last year, again, were pretty much all due to suspension. So I think it was a miscalculation. And, does it mean that the Patriots are dead in the water? No. D-Hop make them 5 games better? Absolutely not. D-Hop's not bringing them to a Super Bowl. But could D-Hop be the difference and help them win an extra game or 2? I'd argue he could help them win that extra game or 2. And now the issue, Gabby, is – can I call you Gabby?
Yeah.
Call you Gabby. The issue, Gabby, is that your margin of error is so damn tight now. Like it's so minute. You don't – like it, we were talking about it earlier. If Devontae Parker's hurt, if he's going to miss a couple weeks or he's not the same kind of guy this year, okay. Tyquan Thornton, again, missing time. Will miss the first 4 games. Juju Smith-Schuster, if his knee becomes a problem and he can't play. So your margin for error is so minute. You need all of those guys to stay healthy. And you need your tight ends. Gesicki got hurt. Thankfully, he's back now and healthy, somewhat, as far as we know. But, Hunter Henry has a little bit of an injury history. So if you had D-Hop, he would just have been another, tool in the tool belt to go after defenses. And he would have been able to give you some of that margin for error where if a guy went down, you wouldn't be as worried because you had DeAndre Hopkins. So, I hated it. I hated it that they didn't sign him. I thought they should have. I had much less of an issue with, signing Zeke instead of Dalvin Cook for reasons, but the D-Hop thing made no sense to me.
Yeah, I was actually pretty confident that they were going to, based on everything I was hearing and the fact that his visits with the Patriots went well. And, I just really felt like they were going to sign him because it made too much sense to me. It was just too logical for the
Yeah.
Patriots to make that kind of move and sign somebody like that. And I feel like he was one of those missing pieces of the puzzle that would make sense for the Patriots with where they're at right now. And I said, this is awesome because this can be just another good weapon for Mac Jones with a proven track record of success in the league. And like you said, I mean, he's not like the best receiver in the world, but we know how talented of a player he is. And we know that he has the capability to be, a front end receiver for the Patriots. And I don't think it would have done anything bad for them. It would have only benefited the team and made them better if they did sign him. And I had convinced myself that it was happening. So then when it didn't
Yeah.
happen, I was even more disappointed in the fact that it was something they very easily could have done based on how the whole deal was worked out. And I was looking at it and I said, the Patriots couldn't do this. Like they couldn't pay
Oh, they
this
could.
money. Like, you know what I mean? Like why not? And I always wonder, at what point is Bill willing to invest in players like that, because his receiving core has always been something that seems to lack top tier talent for a while now. And it's something that he hasn't really seemed to be willing to invest in. And I just wonder why that is and at what point he feels like that needs to change. Because I don't know why he doesn't seem to want to help Mac Jones out from that standpoint. Because the question I'm constantly asking is, who is he supposed to throw the ball to really? Who do we feel confident with being that guy that he can target from a receiver standpoint? And that question just hasn't been able to fully be answered. And I always have wondered, why Bill isn't willing to kind of get those types of top tier players like the Dolphins or the Bengals or teams like that are really doing to help their quarterback succeed.
Yeah, and then there's a few things. And by the way, don't feel bad, and I'm not saying you feel bad, but don't feel bad about being excited about the possibility of Hopkins, because I think everybody should have been excited. Yeah. And the mental gymnastics that some Patriots fans will do to try to excuse things, it's truly, I'd say, borderline commendable that you work that hard in the mental gymnastics to talk yourself into believing like, oh, well, they just weren't very interested in him. Look, you're not flying the dude up to Gillette Stadium and spending an entire day with him unless you're interested. And also don't believe in the idea that like, oh, he and Bill O'Brien, that wasn't going to work out. Again, they wouldn't have flown him up if they thought practice was going to be an issue, if they thought Bill O'Brien and that relationship was going to be an issue, if they weren't truly interested in the guy. They're not flying him in and talking to him and talking contract with him unless they're interested. It's pretty simple. Now, as far as the Belichick stuff offensively, a couple things on that. Number one, he's a defensive guy. He's a defensive guy. He's always been a defensive guy. And that's what he just kind of sees the game, through that prism. He always will. So I think Bill will always be willing to spend a little more money on the defensive player than offensive player, and sometimes a lot more money. And if you look at how they've handled it, I know they went, it was banana land with the money gun a couple of years ago in free agency when they just started spending millions upon millions on everybody.
That was wild.
Brought in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, and Bill was like, give me every tight end that you have. That was, we all know that was that's the anomaly in the 20 plus years Bill's been here. Yep. If you look back, Bill always is like ready to pull the trigger on a top tier talent defensively versus offensively. It's fact. Yep. Matthew Judon, example. Adalys Thomas years ago, example. Stephon Gilmore, example. I mean, he paid Devin McCourty to stay here at the top of the market. He's always been willing. Ty Law, not Ty Law, Darrelle Revis, the other top corner that they had, one of the best corners ever. When he needed it, right? He brought Revis in and he brought Browner in to work with Revis. he's always been willing to pull the trigger. And even when you look at some of the offensive weapons like Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, they paid them like top tight ends. Are they top tight ends? No. They paid them like top tight ends because they were stuck in a really bad spot at tight end because they didn't draft well. They drafted Dalton Keene and, Devin Asiasi, and they both crapped the bed. I will say Keene got hurt, so it is what it is with him. Who knows if he would have been, good. He just got injured. But, they kept swinging and missing, right? So I think it's number one, he's a defensive guy, always going to lean towards defense. And that's just how it goes. Number two, he's always looking for the best deal. When you bring up names, people will say like, oh, Nick, Gabby, what are you talking about? Randy Moss. He got Randy Moss off the scrap heap. Easy trade to make with the Raiders because they were desperate and Moss wanted out. Wes Welker, got him on a great, sweet deal. Julian Edelman, drafted him in the 7th round. Even when you look at the two young receivers, the rookie receivers this year, which I think is a bright spot, and we should be, somewhat optimistic and happy about it. I'm not telling you they're going to produce huge this year because they're rookies. But to have Kayshon Boutte and Pop Douglas, do what they've done so far in their first
potential there for sure.
Yeah, right. But they were 6th round picks, right?
Yep.
Now he invested in N'Keal Harry. Oof, we know how that ended up.
What a nightmare.
He invested in Tyquan Thornton. Woof, that hasn't looked so good so far. So there's a lot of different answers to the question. He's a defensive guy. He's fiscally conservative when making decisions on that side of the ball, for the most part. Again, there are some anomalies, but I'm talking about the balance of his career. Also, I don't think he evaluates offensive talent as well as he evaluates defensive talent. Again, on balance, does he hit? Yes. Edelman, obvious hit. Gronkowski, obvious hit.
Right. Yeah.
There are examples, but how many times have they swung and missed on offensive players in the top 3 or 4 rounds? It's wow. especially in recent years, a number of times. So I think there's some issue at times evaluating that side of the ball. And I also think there's this overlapping philosophy that affects everything I've talked about in the last minute or two. And that overlapping philosophy, that overwhelming from 30,000 feet view, is that Bill Belichick believes that you don't need a top-tier quarterback to win at a high level. And it's kind of weird because he happened to have the greatest of all time at quarterback for 20 years. But I think he believes that it is more system than quarterback. He believes in the 53-man roster. He believes that if you're balanced on special teams and you're good on defense and good on offense, you can make it. And what I'll say is this, Gabby, as we get ready for the season to kick off on Sunday, to me, this season, the 2023 season for the Patriots, that is going to be the ultimate litmus test for Bill Belichick in this current NFL. Because what Belichick is saying is he's looking around the league and he's betting on his brand of football. And he's betting that I don't have to go out and get a top receiver. I don't have to go out there and, have a Travis Kelce or a Tyreek Hill or an A.J. Brown or any of these guys. We don't need that. His philosophy, again, is special teams, defense, offense, all 3 phases, all that stuff. I can win at a high level with a slightly above average quarterback. That's going to be put to the test this year because the rest of the NFL disagrees with Belichick. The rest of the NFL is funneling as many offensive players into their system that they can afford. Belichick's, he's zigging while everybody's zagging. And if he has an 8-win season or a 7-win season, the ultimate question will be, what will Robert Kraft do at that point? And will RKK say, we got a coach who's, he's not really building the team in the way that we've got to build this team now?
Yeah, I've been concerned about this for the last couple of years, really. And just the fact that Belichick has been doing this for so long and is obviously so knowledgeable about the game of football and the way that he does things that he's been doing for so long. But the game has changed naturally, and the talent has changed, and the way that the quarterbacks now today are approaching the game is different. And you have, a lot of mobile young quarterbacks now who can be versatile, and the way that they're playing the game is different. And I look at, the Bills as an example with Josh Allen and just everything that he can do out there, and just how vastly different the Bills as a team look than the Patriots right now. And I do wonder if, the Patriots could use a change soon in terms of that, the coaching, and bringing somebody in who's like a fresh face to the Patriots organization that's almost more in tune with and willing to make changes to adapt more to today's NFL. And I've wondered, for a little bit now, if they would ever pull that trigger on Belichick, just because of how successful he's been as a coach. And I'm not really convinced that they ever would do that. But I do sometimes wonder if a change is really needed at this point for the Patriots, and somebody who's able to kind of see the league for what it is today. And like you said, I think it's going to be very telling this season if Belichick's strategy works or not. I personally, people have asked me, how many wins I think they'll get this year. I have them at 9. I don't see them winning any more than that. That might be a little too optimistic, but I also think that's achievable for them to win 9 games. So I'm curious your answer on that too. But I just think, today's NFL is a lot different than the Belichick and Brady era really was of football. And it seems like Belichick is unwilling to really change anything about the way that he approaches the game or the way that he constructs his team. And I wonder if a change would be beneficial for the Patriots, no matter how successful Belichick is as a coach overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting close to that point, right? And I think, I remember I was doing radio in Boston a couple of years ago when Brady had left and Cam came in, and
yeah,
I said, look, like, this year is like one of those transition years, and Belichick will be judged by what they do, after this year. He'll be judged by 2021 because this year is just COVID and all the other stuff that was happening. It was like it's a transition year.
Yeah.
And they came back, they won 10 games in 2021. And Mac had a good rookie season. And it felt like, hey, maybe they're kind of turning this ship around. But I think you're at the point now where really 25 and 26 the last 3 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah.
And, this is year 4 now. This is year 4 post Brady. And I feel like, with all due respect to what Belichick has done and how much he has won, and there's no denying how much he has won, but it's year 4 now without Brady. Yeah. And if you can't get this team to be at a playoff level 4 years after that quarterback left, then there is something inherently wrong within the system. Yep. And Bill is the system, because Bill is not only, as we know, the coach, he's also, as Bill Parcells said, if I'm going to cook a meal, I want to shop for the groceries. Bill's also shopping for the groceries.
It's so
when you look at it, he's the system. He's the guy. Now, can the Patriots win? I'm with you, by the way. I've been, hovering around 8 or 9 wins for this team this year. I'd be very surprised if they won less than 7. I don't see them.
No, I don't think they'll be that bad.
Yeah, I don't see them bottoming out, so to speak. But, number one, what's it look like? Because I think, wins is a weird number. It's a funky thing to kind of try to project onto the head coach, because you don't know what's going to happen. If Mac gets banged up, if Mac misses a couple of games, if, do they win games, at the end of the year and it seems like they're playing better and they're there's some momentum and they're figuring things out. So I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if they win 7 games or less, RKK is going to fire them. But do I think that if they win 6 or 7 games this year, there'll be a change? I think that there could be a change, and I think there should be a change. I don't know if it's necessarily getting rid of Bill as the coach. I do wonder if at first Kraft will say, all right, well, we got to find somebody who's going to, give us better ingredients for the meal that we're cooking than you've given us the last few years. Now, will Belichick agree to that? I don't think so. I think if you told Belichick we're taking the personnel power from you, I think Belichick would say, screw you, I'm leaving.
Yeah. No,
So I don't know if that would work out, but I think that's more where Kraft could go versus we're blowing this. I don't want to say blowing this thing up because that would be too dramatic, but we're getting rid of you, Bill, and we're putting Gerard Mayo in there, and that's what we're going to do. I think Kraft might first try to strip the power away from Belichick in certain areas and say, just focus on coaching, Bill. If you want to beat that Shula record, just focus on coaching and let somebody else give you the guys to play. I don't think Belichick would say yes to that, but I think that's the first step to change. Now, if they win 3 games, I think all bets are off, and I think Belichick could easily be, gone.
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing because could they win? Yeah, like this team could win 10 games. They could. They could win 10 games. They could find a way to get into the playoffs. The way you do that is you have a top 3 to 5 defense. You don't turn the football over. Everybody on the offensive side stays healthy. Mac plays, really well. Bill O'Brien does a fantastic job of scheming the offense. Your special teams, your rookie kicker, is as solid as Nick Folk was the last couple of years. Those things, but it's like almost every single one of those things has to happen for this team to win 10 or 11 games. Yep. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the margin for error. And when you build a team with 53, some people will say like, oh, well, that gives you more depth all around. Sort of, kind of. But again, you're missing the top talent when you do that. So now you're depending on a little bit below that tier. And now you need everybody to play at their best, to stay healthy, and to be able to learn the scheme and all. Now you need everything else to go really, really well. If everything goes really, really well, this team could win 10 games. They could slide in. But, are you willing to bet that everything is going to go really, really well across the board? And I think that's a really tough bet to make, especially considering the schedule they got.
Yeah, it's funny, too, when you said you can't turn the ball over, because I can't even count the number of times we watched them turn the football over last year. And it was just so aggravating to watch that, too. But yeah, it's literally like every single thing has to go right in order for that to happen. And they are just in a tough, competitive division that got even more competitive, this offseason. And I still don't see the Jets as like this huge, I think they'll be a playoff team, but I don't think they're anything super special. Aaron Rodgers does not scare me, nor do the Packers 2.0 as a team scare me. But I think, this division is competitive. And I think in terms of the talent within the division, the Patriots definitely feel like they're a step behind everybody else.
Going into it on talent, on talent, you would say yes, Yeah. You'd say the old on paper, but I always say, well, that's all the hell I got right now is on paper until they play. I can only tell you what's on paper. So on paper, talent-wise, yeah, I mean, they're the 4th team in the division. I tend to kind of lean towards your way about the Jets. I tweeted today.
They're the Jets to me until they show me they're not. It's kind of my mentality.
Yeah, like there's a lot of hype, man. They're talking a lot. The media's talking a lot. And I'm not saying that they can't be a really good team. Again, they're super talented. But if you're concerned about the schedule for the Patriots early on, everybody's thought about the first 4 games of the Patriots. Look at the Jets schedule. Look at the Jets' first 6 or 7 games. If you're concerned about the Patriots' first 4 games, then, I mean, the Jets, they've got to play just murderer's row the first 6 or 7 weeks of the year. Their easiest quote-unquote game the first 5 or 6 is against the Patriots.
Yeah.
So Aaron Rodgers, I think he'll be fine, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
He's getting older. And if you're worried about the Patriots' offensive line, the Jets' offensive line has been atrocious.
Yes.
So here's the overall thing. How I'd say, like, we get wrapped up in all these week in and week out, and I get it. Again, I've done radio for a while. I totally understand that idea and that viewpoint of like week after week after week, we're kind of like, just. But if you think about it, there's usually like 4 or 5 really terrible teams, and there's usually 4 or 5 really good teams, top contenders. We go into every year saying 4 or 5 teams, Super Bowl favorites, 4 or 5 teams, number 1 pick favorites. And that leaves you with 22 football teams stuck in that middle tier. And there's not a whole hell of a lot of difference between the teams that will win 7 games or 10 games. There's just really not. And we've seen that with the Patriots in the last couple of years. Last year's team could have won 10 games. They could have also won 3 games or 4 games.
So true, yeah.
There's not a lot of difference between that middle. And so the issue is that here in New England, we had such success for 2 decades that I don't know if there's appreciation for how the league is overall and how it usually works. And so, could this team win 10 games? Yes. Could this team win 6 or 7 games? Yes. It's in that middle. And so that's where they are right now. They're in that middle. I don't think they're one of the 4 or 5 worst teams. They're not one of the top 5 teams in the league. So it's a rat race with the other 22 teams. And where will they end up? That's what we're talking about. Like, do I think that we're going to have 4 teams in the AFC East have like 10 wins or more? No. Like, I think talent-wise, we talk about it. We're like, oh, yeah, it could happen. It certainly could happen. But it's more likely that you'll probably have, the Patriots around 9 wins, 8 or 9 wins. One of those other 3 teams is not going to be as good as everybody thinks they're going to be, and they'll probably win, 7 to 9 games. And then you'll have 2 teams with double-digit plus wins. That's just kind of how it usually works out. So, it's just the Patriots were in that upper echelon every single year.
That's what people got used to, yeah.
Yes. And so now it's like I tweeted out the other day, like, I'm not super high on this team. Again, I think they're around 9 wins. Could they win 10? Sure. But, man, if you listen to some people that do radio shows, and I know many of these people personally, I've worked with many of them before, I said, if this is how they handle a possible 8 or 9 win team, I would be afraid of how certain people in this market would handle a truly bad football team, a team that wins like 3 games, like, old Patriots team. Like, if this team, the way they talk about this team, some people, not all of them, but the way some talk about this team, why even show up? Like, it makes you feel they're going to win 3 or 4 games. And we're not talking about the Jaguars of the years that they couldn't get out of their own way. We're not talking about the Lions that couldn't win more than 3 or 4 games a year. So I know it's tough because it's like, we're caught in the bubble, and everybody's caught in the bubble in New England. But if you just try to pull yourself out of the bubble and you look at the big picture, the Patriots are not an awful team. They're not a great team.
They're like average.
They are the cold cut in the sandwich. They're the meat. They're just stuck in the middle of that sandwich. They're just stuck right in the middle. And that's the place you don't want to be, by the way.
I would not. That's like the worst spot to be in, actually.
It's purgatory. It's like, you want to be at the bottom and get a top 5 pick and fix your team, or you want to be at the top. And so they're just kind of treading water in that middle. So, and if they keep treading the water in the middle, I think Belichick will stay and he'll beat Shula's record. But, do fans want to go through 2 or 3 more seasons of 7 to 9 wins? Because that's what we might be looking at.
Yeah, it's very tough, especially obviously, like you mentioned before, after coming off all the success with Brady and just Patriots fans being used to them always being just a top tier team and knowing they'll be a playoff team, knowing they'll go deep in the playoffs pretty much every single year, to going to where we're at now. And it's like, how are you supposed to feel about this team? I mean, you can't get overly excited about them, but you can't get super disappointed by them either, because they're not winning 3 or 4 games. Like you said, it's a very average overall team. And that's just not really a fun place to be, but it could be a lot worse.
Oh God. Yeah. Oh God. Like I've done national radio. I've done radio down in Virginia Beach. I did radio, as I said, in Sacramento the last year and a half before coming back home. And I was covering the Niners and the Raiders. So, two different teams. Yeah. And yeah, it could be a lot worse. And that doesn't, and here's the thing. I think some people have been conditioned. You and I, what we just said, it could be worse. People take that as like almost like an excuse, or you're a homer, or no, it's fact. It's just looking at the reality of the situation. Things could be much worse. You could be dealing with a football team that's looking at 3 or 4 wins. Now, maybe again, short-term pain, long-term gain, you could have that argument and say, hey, if you have 2 crappy seasons, but you get top talent in the draft, and then all of a sudden that leads you to, 10 years, 15 years of dominance, you would probably take those 2 years. But if we're just looking at this team, big picture, they're not awful. They're not awful. Even though some people will talk about them like they're awful. They're just not very good. And so that's where you're at. And, is it going to change? I think defensively they're going to be good, and I think they could be really good defensively, and I'm excited about some of the young talent on that side of the ball. I do have serious questions that, you and I have talked about a little bit during this conversation. When you look at Mac and when you look at how Bill handles offense, Mac is, May of 2024, this team has to make a decision on Mac's 50-year option.
Yep.
And so you need to know, and has Mac been put in a good enough position for you to say yes to that option at the end of this year? Like, if Mac is seen as kind of like an average quarterback, middle of the pack guy, you're going to be left looking back at it and saying, well, is that because it's Mac, or is that because it's the wide receivers, the offensive line, and some of the things that Bill did? The other part of that is that, everybody wants not everybody, but the people that want to say goodbye to Mac and say, there's no way. Nick, he's like the 15th best quarterback at best in the league. Okay, even if we say that he is, it's really difficult to replace that guy. And that's what people, I don't think, appreciate. Even if you have a quarterback that's between 10 and 15 or so, it's very difficult in the league to replace that kind of quarterback. If you're going to move on from Mac, you need a definite, surefire upgrade from Mac.
Yep.
And that means you need a top 12 quarterback in the league, which means you get those guys 2 ways. Usually, you draft the guy, right? You can draft that guy and you develop him, or somehow, some way, somebody slips through the cracks and you bring that guy in. There aren't a lot of Geno Smiths in the world. There aren't a lot of Kirk Cousins in the world who, get out of Washington and end up being free agents. Quarterbacks don't usually end up being free agents if they're worth anything. So if you tell me, hey, man, we got to move on from Mac, okay, but as long as you have it in your head that Belichick is going to be uber aggressive and trade a bunch of picks and move up to the top 5 to pick a quarterback.
Yeah, nope, not seeing that.
Yeah, and I know there's been Mahomes was 10th, and there's been Rodgers was in the 20s. Russell Wilson, when he was good, he was drafted in the middle rounds, and Dak and Jalen Hurts was a 2nd-round pick. We can play that game all we want, but usually the cream of the crop is the cream of the crop, and usually, quarterbacks are picked in the top, 10 or so. Top 10 to 15, and Mac was 15th, right? So somewhere in those top 10 picks is usually the best bet to bring in a quarterback. The Herberts of the world, the Mahomes of the world, the Burrows of the world. We can go on and on. Josh Allen. That's usually where you find that kind of guy. So if you're moving on from Mac, you better have a plan, and that plan better include bringing somebody in who's much better than Mac. And if you think it's going to be easy to find somebody who's much better than Mac, I've seen a lot of bad football And I would say it's probably not as easy as you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is a big season for Mac. So hopefully he can kind of shut down some of those haters and critics who just really are trying to blame him for all the Patriots problems right now. And maybe they'll exceed my expectations, maybe they won't. Regardless of whether they win on Sunday or not, I just know that I'm excited to have NFL football back. It's the best time of the year, really, when the season comes back, and it's going to be a challenge this year. We might see a very similar season to last year in terms of their record, but I think it'll be a more pleasurable team to watch on the field, because there's going to be some things that are going to be so much better than the way that they were executed last year, and that's going to make it a little more peaceful of an experience to watch the team.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's possible that they have the same kind of record, but be better this year.
Yeah.
I just think the schedule and some other things could get in the way. So I do think we'll have less. Why the hell did that just happen? We'll have less of that hopefully this year than we've had in recent memory.
Right. Yeah. Well, Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here with me and talk Patriots. It's always so nice to hear input from, people who constantly are talking Patriots and really just doing what you do. So it was so nice to hear your perspective on where you think this team is at this year.
Well, Gabby, it was great to join you. And again, I apologize for the Blue Man Group a little bit with the hue. Working on things in my studio right now. Lighting will be better next time if you have me on.
Absolutely.
But yeah. It was great to catch up, and hopefully people enjoyed this, and hopefully we have better football to watch this year.
Yeah, right? Like, go Patriots. I mean, go Boston, really, in general. Big Boston.
No doubt.
Boston sports fan over here, but yeah, go Pats, and I will definitely have to have you back on again. Thank you so much.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.